her brother, who had moved out to California, who had arrived in California shortly after the Korean conflict, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. He was a GI living there, and his sister was there. And when the brother figured out that his sister was pregnant, he decided to send her back home east and break up that relationship. And there, this young gal, just barely 18 years of age, traveled by train from California all the way back to the city of New York and back to her home and her dad in Brooklyn. She had a very difficult time with that pregnancy because you got to remember, this is 1954. And the way people viewed an unwed mother in those days is vastly different than the total acceptance we've given it today. She had very few, if any, friends. Her father was not all that thrilled about this arrangement of her being home for a while. And one day she's sitting out on the steps of her little brownstone-type apartment building, multi-story building in Brooklyn on Ovington Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. And she's sitting there on the front steps, and this young woman comes by and says, "May I sit down next to you?" The gal said, "Sure." They started talking. And suddenly they became virtually instantly best of friends. I mean, it just seemed like a natural thing that this friendship developed. And all of a sudden, this is now the summer of 1954. All of a sudden, this young gal, her name, by the way, was Lee, is moving in with this pregnant mother-to-be who's not married. And she stayed there and took care of her every need for a number of months. In October of that year, Hurricane Hazel made its approach to the greater city of New York. It's October, kind of a late-in-the-season hurricane. And it was on that night that the woman went into labor. And in the storm that came, they took a cab, her dad, her friend Lee, and her, to the hospital. And around 5:30 in the morning, she gave birth to a son. And she named the son. And for the next several weeks, her friend Lee stayed with her to help take care of her newborn baby boy and encouraged her in the most uncertain terms to get this child baptized. It meant a lot to her. Now, I know a lot of Christians that are listening believe it's an adult-only baptism. I'm not going to have that discussion right now. We'll do that some other day. And so around the corner, just down the block from where they lived, there was this Lutheran church. It was called the Salem Danish Evangelical Lutheran Church in Brooklyn. And it was a congregation made up mostly of people from the Scandinavian countries. And Lee went there to talk to the pastor of that church about considering doing this baptism. Now, this church had a pretty hard policy about not doing baptisms outside of their congregation, but for whatever reason, this pastor felt very led to do it, and a date was chosen, December the 12th of that year, to do the baptism shortly after the regular church service. And there, Lee and this woman's father and an aunt all gathered to witness the baptism of this young boy. The boy's name was Robert Lee Erickson at birth. The mother chose to give the middle name Lee in honor of this gal Lee that had come into her life and taken such good care of her in those days. Shortly after the baptism, Lee said she had to leave and was never heard from again. This woman swore that person, Lee, must have been an angel sent from God to help her through the most difficult time in her life. And over the next year, starting in December of 1954, that woman struggled to try to keep her son, but within a year's time, she knew that there was no way she could keep that son. And so one day she finally decided, in December of 1955, the child is little over a year of age, to put him up for adoption. And because that child had been baptized, it made a big difference in New York State and in the city of New York where that child could be placed. He no longer could be placed just anywhere. And so this child was placed through a Lutheran service to a couple in Long Island. And at age 1 year and a couple of months, this child found his new home in a town called Manhasset, New York. And because of the placement in that home, he had all the opportunity to go to a Christian school during his younger years, and had a set of grandparents in particular that encouraged his talents and the things that he felt led to do. And he had a very unique life. That boy, Robert Lee Erickson, is me. That is me. By the grace of God, I was chosen to be brought into a home. And God has guided every step of my entire life in ways that I sometimes find so hard to imagine. You know, my life has not always been easy. I've faced some hard times and difficult times, but in the final analysis, God has always been in control. He always has and always will be. Oh, to know that no matter what our circumstance, God still chooses us like an adoptive parent willingly takes in a new son or daughter.
I must have felt your tears when they took me from your arms. I'm sure I must have heard you say goodbye. Young and so afraid, had you made a big mistake? Could an ocean even hold the tears you cried? But you had dreams for me, you wanted the best for me, and you made the only choice you could that night. And you gave life to me, a brand new world to see, like playing baseball in the yard with Dad at night. Mom reading Goodnight Moon and praying in my room. So if you worry if your choice was right, when you gave me up, oh, you gave everything to me. And if I saw you on the street, would you know that it was me? And would your eyes be blue or green like mine? Or would we share a warm embrace? Or would you know me in your heart? Or would you smile and let me walk on by? Knowing you had dreams for me, you wanted the best for me. Oh, I hope that you'll be proud of who I am. You gave life to me, a chance to find my dreams, and the chance to fall in love. You should have seen sea, like playing baseball with my son late at night, and reading Goodnight Moon and praying in his room. I'm so grateful that I have this life. When you gave me up, you gave everything to me. Everything to me.
I know for those that give birth to a child and willingly and lovingly give them up for adoption are doing a wonderful thing for that child, because, see, when a child is adopted, they're wanted. We live in a day today where abortion has killed multiplied millions of potential children in a country where, you know, people are still wanting to adopt, and they're not there. I want to follow up a little bit on my story that I just shared with you. You know, as I grew up, my parents let me know, just like my brother, who was also adopted from another person, and a sister. We actually had 3 of us that were all adopted with all different backgrounds. But we knew at a young age that we were. And we felt very special because of that, being wanted. It was made very clear that we weren't just an accident. We were wanted. That's a great feeling. But I always wondered, growing up, especially when I got into my teens and early 20s, you know, what were the circumstances regarding my adoption? You know, what happened? You know, I didn't really know the whole story at that time. I learned more about it later. By the time I got into my 30s, my wife was kind of curious about the circumstances, not just of my birth, but, you know, my biological heritage. It's kind of nice to know what things you might encounter in life, you know, health issues in particular, because primarily because you don't know what your heredity is. You know, is there cancer in the family? Are there some diseases that are more common? You know, these things that are helpful to know based upon your family history. And I really didn't have one. And so in my 30s, this has got to be now in the 1980s, my wife said, wouldn't it be interesting if you could find out more about your circumstances? And remember, this is pre-internet. This is long before Google and all this kind of stuff. And I had very little information to work from. I mean, very little to work from. All I had was my New York State birth certificate that indicated I was born in Brooklyn, New York. And, of course, the parents' names are now altered, but I had the date and everything else. I had an altered baptismal certificate. Remember, I told you about that young boy being baptized on December 12th of 1954. And it showed my parents' names on that baptismal certificate, being my newly adoptive parents. So I really had nothing to go on except the names of some witnesses. And I saw the last name Erickson, and I saw the other names, you know, Lee and all that on that certificate, who I never could make any connection to. And so I never really was sure of what my name was. Well, the law was changed slightly in New York, which allowed people to get non-identifying information regarding an adoption. And the agency that had handled